Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of an Irish knitting podcast. I am Sam. I am an artist, illustrator and aspiring knitting designer coming to you from Dublin in Ireland. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for coming by. It's always a pleasure to have a new viewer, and this helps me as well to share my art and my craft with the world, with this lovely community that we created together. If you are a returning viewer, once again, thank you for being patient and coming back to these videos. This is my kind of attempt of a knitting, crafty, artistic podcast in which I share with you all my crafty adventures, finished works, works in progresses, acquisitions, some artworks, as well as books, trips, anything that really happens in my artistic work. And it's a way for me as well to keep my mental health sound and just be able to share and learn as well from you. Today on the show, let's call it like that, we have a couple of finished works. One test knit as a new work in progress, and what else? A few acquisitions, a lot of books, and a talk about Inktober for the art segment of the video. So buckle up, bring your cup of tea nearby, your coffee, whatever you are doing, if you are knitting or painting or doing some other crafts, and let's get started. So let's start with finished works, and the one that you see here in all its glory is the sweater number 29 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I'm very sorry, I have a terrible back pain, and it might be difficult to stand up, twirl and do all those things, but I'm gonna do my best, and I'll show you the jumper here. It's beautiful, it's absolutely gorgeous, and the little detail on the top of the shoulder is amazing. I think it fits really well. Let's try to get back onto the chair. Jumper wise, so let's start with the yarn. If you follow my previous videos, you have heard at length me talking about this yarn. Unfortunately, I don't have a ball with me because they are all here. This is Drops Daisy, which is a new line of merino non-superwash yarn by Drops that I really wanted to try because I do love merino yarn. I feel like they are the best yarns for my skin. I'm very sensitive to wool. I ended up in the past, and probably in the future I will end up knitting great jumpers and garments and never wear them because they are extremely itchy. This weekend, just a bracket of storytelling, I was wearing one of my Aran sweater type of thing, made with the Peer Gynt by Sandnes, which is a very woolly decay yarn. And I found myself having the most awful afternoon that I could ever imagine. The yarn was scratchy, was itchy, and Peer Gynt is not the itchiest of the yarns. So I had at the end to wear a shirt underneath in order to avoid being all scratchy all the time. Hence why I decided to work with merino yarn, or to try this merino yarn. I did try other merino yarns before. I tried at length Drops Baby Merino, Merino Extra Fine, something like that, which is a superwash yarn. What is superwash yarn? It's yarn that has been treated with some sort of chemical plasticky coating, so you can just stick it in the washing machine and wash it without the yarn felting at all. In the past, I've knitted with that type of yarn, with superwash yarn, and I always found my jumpers became humongous after washing. The yarn stretches, is too drapey, and all the bad things that you don't really want in a jumper. And I decided to avoid that yarn because it's just work that goes into the bin. Probably it's up to me. I should learn a little bit more how to deal with that sort of yarn. But yeah, I'm very lazy, and it is what it is. Anyway, I was very eager to try this non-superwash yarn. So merino yarn, extremely soft wool, not prickly at all. I'm just wearing a gym type of t-shirt underneath, so the wool is touching my bare skin, and it's not itchy. It's like wearing a what do you call it, a sweatshirt, a hoodie, a cotton layer. But still, it remains woolly and really warm, very nice, and all that you have. Anyway, you know yourself, you can't wear something that doesn't feel great, although it looks amazing, doesn't feel great. Anyway, this yarn ticks all the boxes. Last time I left you that the jumper was finished, I blocked it, and I was in the meanwhile of blocking it, of drying it. And I was really worried that this yarn would behave like a superwash yarn and just slack and become huge afterwards. That didn't happen. The jumper is still very fitting. It kept the shape, and I really love it. Now, someone, I don't remember who, apology, but someone mentioned in a comment in a previous video while I was talking about this Drops Daisy yarn that it does not wear well. It's prone to peely and bubbling and all of that. I can't say that yet. I haven't worn this jumper extensively enough to give any judgment. But so far, I'm really happy with how this turned out and how the yarn behaves. I will update you in the future with the behavior of the yarn after wearing it a few times. Construction of this jumper. This is a brand new pattern. Now, brand new, it's probably been out for a few months now, but it's quite innovative in terms of jumpers that I have knitted before. We have a saddle shoulder, so you can see here the shoulder piece is knitted separately, and then you pick up stitches on one side and the other to knit the front and the back. And I think it gives a lot of it gives a very nice feature for this garment. My favorite things knitwear has a different jumper, different construction of a jumper called number 15, if I'm right, which has the same motif of very simple overall cables going in one direction. And I've knitted that a few times. Is to be honest, one of my favorite patterns. I just wanted to try this. It's a very classy sort of jumper. It's very easy to knit, but there's some things that makes it funny. You don't get bored, and you always look forward for the next thing to happen. One being the shoulder. Now, the shoulder construction is quite interesting. Apart from the saddle, which was completely new to me, there are short rows going on the shoulder cup, which is very clever to make the shoulder fit really nice on your shoulder. I'm repeating shoulder over and over again. Well, you got what I mean. That thing, the short rows around the back as well are working very, very well. And the clever way that the short rows are incorporated into the saddle, it's boom, mind-blowing to me. I really love the construction, if I haven't said that yet. Modification-wise, I really didn't make any modifications apart from the length of the sleeve and reducing massively the amount of stitches at the cuff. The cuff was meant to be quite open in the original pattern. I, as per usual, reduce the stitches so it gets a little less flary out. It's just my style, and as well, the pattern was meant to be written for a lady's body, a woman's body, and I don't really feel like it suits me very much. So I kind of modified this into making it a male's version. Tighter cuff, longer body, and so on and so forth. I really, really love this. Now you can see the cuffs are flaring out a tiny little bit, despite the fact that I decreased the number of stitches and I went down a needle size and so on and so forth. That happened to me before. I think is A, the quality of the yarn being quite sleek, and B, it is what it is. I decided to go for an Italian bind off, and as well using the different type of yarn. That happens. I usually go in with just a thread of transparent elastic to tighten my cuffs, my necks, and the ribbing, the bottom ribbing. I just said a lie to you. I haven't used the Italian bind off, but you can't really recognize the bind off here. I have used the Haya stretchy bind off. I'm gonna put a link below to a video tutorial about this. I have learned about this bind off style from the Knitting Stew podcast, which is gonna be linked below as well. It's basically a tubular way to binding off without having to sew the bind off like you would do for the Italian bind off. So it's a one pass type of bind off that gives an idea of tubularity. I don't even know if it's a word. I suppose it's not, but you know what I mean. It looks like an Italian bind off, but it's not. It's so much quicker. And I think I will use that more often because it's actually very good. Overall, this jumper is great and I'm extraordinarily happy with how it turned out, and yeah, it's just amazing. For a reference, I'm a 110 centimeters embossed, and I think I needed the third size of this, so I warmly recommend the jumper. I probably should take something for my back, it's ginormously painful. Anyway, let's go on with the finished works. So last week I was back in Italy for a little trip visiting my family. My family is from the very north of Italy, not far from the border with Austria. And I was there for just a week. I deliberately haven't brought with me a knitting project because I didn't have any luggage with me. I still have a full wardrobe there at my parents', so it doesn't make much sense for me to pack a bag, pay for a bag for the flight and bring clothes back home. Ergo, the only thing that I could bring with me was my computer, because I was working remotely from Italy, and as well a book. So no knitting for me over there. But you can see here I have a lot of wool that is in acquisition. So we're going to talk about it later. While I was there and acquiring this yarn, mysterious yarn that I have here, I acquired something else that I need to talk about right now. These are my great grandmother double pointed needles. I got some of these a few months ago, like shorter 20 centimeter needles. And yeah, my mom was like, well, listen, I never use this anymore. If you have some use for them, take it with you, it's fine. So now I got a big collection of very long double pointed needles that I found out my great grandmother used to use to knit jumpers and shawls. I don't know if this was a thing, people knitting jumpers in double pointed needles, or if it was my great grandmother was what was available to her. I haven't done any research on that. Anyway, turns out these are 35 centimeters long needles. I have a couple that are 40 and a couple that are 30. So random sizes. And these are, I would say, number 4 needles. So, considering this thing that I found, I was fascinated. I'd never seen such a long double-pointed needles. And considering the fact that I got access to a huge array of yarns that I will tell you about in a second, I decided to cast on a very small project using these things and a yarn. So this is the Oslo hat by Petite Knit, if I'm right. It's a pattern that I've knitted before a few times. Not my favorite, but you know, I was looking for something simple to try out those long needles and as well use some of the acquisition yarns. So let me talk to you about this hat. If you haven't heard about this, you're probably living under a rock, because I think everybody and their dogs have knitted this hat. So basically it's a stockinette or stocking stitch hat with a folded brim. Basically you knit the inside of the brim, the outside of the brim, you fold the brim, you pick up stitches, and then you knit the top. Then this will fold magically. You have the right side of the hat all on one side. This is the second size that I knit. It's meant to be knitted using a chunky yarn, a narrowway yarn. I use a mohair strand held together with a DK yarn. Having knitted this before, I know that it tends to have a lot of positive ease, if you can say that, for a hat. So I went down and I knitted the second size, which is meant to be probably for a baby, but works fine to me. Let me try this on. And as you can see, it still is a bit big, but it's actually fitting quite nicely. It's the first time that I use mohair for a hat, only because I had a huge amount of mohair yarn available to me at that point, and my choices of yarn weren't that great, so it's just a random DK yarn. It's probably, well, I can't tell what brand that is, and this strand of mohair. But yeah, it's really lovely. It fits nicely. I would have preferred the hat to be a little bit tighter, but this can be a nice gift, or I can actually try to felt it a tiny little bit. The decreases on the crown are just lovely, and is the cloudiest, softest hat that you can imagine. Still a bit humid though. I probably should leave it to dry for a few more hours. And this smells amazing. Anyway, these long needles here helped a lot. It's like having to knit with a magic loop or a long cord, but you have double pointed, so you just knit biji in the round, and it's completely fine. When I can, I always use double pointed rather than cords. It's just faster. You just knit in the round without having to pull the cord, pull the needle, change your way of knitting, and so on and so forth. So yeah, a great discovery. Now, I don't know if you can find such long double pointed needles still in the market, but yeah, it's a great little find. I am going to try sooner or later to knit a jumper with this. I really want to understand how that works. That is the end of our finished works. I am going to leave you to some of the images in my beautiful family's farm. We do have a nice vineyard over there, and yeah, it was just really nice and autumny all around. So really hope you enjoy that, and I will be back in a second with my works in progress. So, works in progress wise, I have a couple. I've talked at length about a colorwork jumper that I'm knitting. I unfortunately had to put it on a side because I did apply for my very first test knit with Alicia Plummer, if I'm right, yeah. And she came up with a gorgeous male jumper with 3 button. I think I can put a picture here. I'm gonna check with her later on the editing side of this video. I was told not to share chunks of the patterns or instruction or anything like that, and I will not. But First of all, the test knit is running for 9 weeks, which is quite a long time. But knowing this time of the year for myself and my work life balance is gonna be busy, so I have to drop every other project to concentrate on the test knit. I would like to be fair and be a professional test knitter, so I really want to get this done. But I think I have the freedom to show you where I am at. I have knitted the body of the jumper and I just divided for the back and front. I can't really say much more. I will talk though about the yarn that I'm using. I'm using Host Garn Super Soft yarn that comes in these cones. This is the colors 1044. Unfortunately, I don't have a label. It's one of my favorite colors is this beautiful light blue with specks of beige, gray. It's lovely. And I'm holding this 3 times to get the gauge that the designer suggests. I'm trying to follow the pattern by the letter, although I'm getting some interesting piece on the body now that I'm not quite able to decipher, so I will contact the designer and see what they recommend for that piece. So we'll see about that. If you have any recommendation on how to approach a test knit, let me know, because I'm very new to all these games. So I don't know, for example, if I could just have the freedom of texting the designer and say, listen, I don't understand this piece or this other, or if there is something that doesn't work for me or that I would have preferred having the instruction written in some other ways. I don't know if I have the freedom to say I don't understand this, or I would have done this differently, because if someone says that to one of my design, I get a bit iffy. I don't know in terms of test knit. When I test knit my pattern, I'm always open to suggestion, but I'm a brand new designer. I don't really have much experience, so I welcome all the learning possibilities that I have. Alicia is a great designer. She has amazing patterns and she's super experienced, so there is that barrier there. But very happy with this, by the way. It's flying through the needles, being this held 3 times makes like an arm weight type of yarn. So here you go. I am now going to dally into the rest of my works in progress. You've seen them before. There's no update on them, and I really hope I can make this by the end of the test knit. Now, I know that you all are very intrigued around this acquisition piece. Let me give you a background story. So, my mom has a huge yarn stash. And when I'm saying huge, it's not even an euphemism, it's humongous. There's basically a room in the house that used to be an old cellar type of thing that is filled to the brim with yarns. Unfortunately, my mom is one of the old guard type of people that she doesn't know what a yarn she is stashing, and probably she doesn't care. Like, there are tons of acrylic yarns that she acquired during the years, tons of woolly yarns without a label, so it's a big mess. But she likes that mess and she finds herself around that mess, so it's fair enough, not for me to judge. My stash is more particular. I know exactly what yarn I have, what fiber, what brand, and so on and so forth. But anyway, she was kind of getting rid of a few cones of yarn, and these are the ones that I brought over to Ireland with me. And the vast majority of the cones that she was destashing are coming from companies that makes knitted stuff like jumpers and whatever, scarf, blankets, carpets, all knitted goodness. And my region there is quite famous for these type of brands of companies. I don't know, you've heard of Benetton, or Benetton, how you say in the English way. It's a knitting garment fashion company, and they have their laboratories there. So back in the days, a lot of families used to acquire work from them and knit for them in their family little business machine. So the company used to give them yarn. The families with their little companies used to provide middle work, the garment, the fabric. And then someone else is used to put garments together. So it was like an old business that put big brands, big company into smaller companies in order to fulfill their ladder of work. I don't know if it makes any sense, but my mom knows a lot of these people that used to work for other companies. They used to do knitted stuff. I'm not saying Benetton, but any other company. So when they retired, of course, they had a huge amount of yarn left in their little workshops. And as it happens, a lot of these yarns is very good quality wool. Now, I did acquire a lot of mohair because my mom doesn't use mohair. She was giving it away, so I was like, I might not, but who knows? It's nice, woolly wool, very expensive. You have to buy it. So I ended up getting 2 cones of this gorgeous light brown thing and this kind of creamy white. Now the camera doesn't give any justice to this color. You can see the cones are all halfway through. Here it says that it's a 500 gram cone, but definitely they are not 500 grams. It's probably a couple of 100 grams left each cone. But, you know, putting them together, you can make a garment. And I acquired as well a blue mohair. And I think this is, if not a complete cone, this is at least almost 500 grams. And this is, we don't have any indication of the color or the company, nothing. But it's a nice, lovely blue mohair that I can see can go into some sort of garment. So I'm very happy with this. So for now we have about 500 grams of light mauve color. I would say 300 grams of this light gray and 500 grams of beautiful blue mohair. Last thing was this. This is massive kilo type of thing. Do we have an indication? No, we don't. So this is 80% wool, 20% polyester, and it's kind of a sport weight, light sport weight. It feels to me like cotton. It's a very interesting feeling. I don't know if you can tell from the yarn. It's black, so the light is not really helping much. but it looks like braided yarn. Now, I don't know if this is because it's full of spinning oils, so the fibers don't really tend to stick together and gives this feeling of cotton yarn, or if because of the 20% of acrylic or polyamide in it that gives this throatiness thing. But I was fascinated about these giant cones. I was like, I'm gonna get that. If nothing, I'll get I don't know, a carpet out of it or something. Something will work out of this yarn. It's a lot of yarn. I think it's a kilo of yarn. Do we have a label here? We don't have a label here. But yeah, that's the acquisition as well. So a lot of yarn, and I can't wait to go back to get my hands on more of this yarn gorgeousness. But this is what I could carry. I had to buy a bag for the plane to carry all of this, and I was terrified to get stopped with the very long needles and this huge amount of yarn, but they didn't bother me at the security, so I went on easy on the plane. Now, this was it for the knitting and yarn goodness part of this podcast. If this is the part that interests you, thank you so much for watching. Please consider to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. This helps me a lot to get some visibility on the internet, as well as, once again, to build my community. Now, there are two things I would like to talk to you about. Book updates, because I have been reading a lot, and there are quite a few interesting things I would like to share with you, and Inktober. So I will come back to you in a second with this update. Now, while I was in Italy, my mother and my dad started to farm bees, so they magically became beekeepers. Now, my grandfather back in the days used to keep bees, quite a lot of beehives, like 20 or something, so a lot of work. And it was kind of a family thing. We were famous to be the honey producer of my town, and people used to come buy honey. If there was a stray hive of bees mooching around the place, they would call my granddad to take them away, and yeah, it was a thing. But my granddad got old. He couldn't keep up with the work, and so we just left the beekeeping thing. But we always had all the materials, the instrument for beekeeping stored somewhere in the house. And a couple of years ago, my mom and my dad, probably due to they're getting older and finding new interests, I don't know, they got into a beekeeping course, and they started to raise or keep bees, and now they have a few beehives. And yeah, just to say that I was there helping my dad with the bees. I found it quite interesting. If you wanna have a look, I'll come back to you soon for the last part of the podcast. So, let's talk Inktober. What is Inktober? I did film a full video on Inktober. I will put the link below. So, if you want some more information, you can find them below. It's basically a challenge that give artists a prompt a day for the month of October to paint something using ink. This time I kind of decided to go out on a tangent. The prompts are random, of course, but it's always a way for an artist to be able to experiment with your style, your art, without being bound to making a piece for, I don't know, selling or being beautiful to be hung on a wall. And it gives some, at least to me, some freedom to experiment and just be free. Something that I always wanted to do was to illustrate, and especially illustrate character design, having a possibility to develop a character for a story, for example, for a book, for a children's book, for, I don't know, a poem, something. And so I came up with, let's see, this character here. This is a bear that is following the Inktober prompts over and over and over again. So during this month I'm trying to get this bear to take some sort of shapes and become my character design type of thing. Why a bear? There's no connection with a bear apart from the fact that growing up I had a giant teddy bear in my bedroom. I still have it somewhere. And my dad used to buy me a little storybook every month called Bossy the Bear. And I always got very, I don't know, attached to the bear character, you know, like what's the name of your woman there? Beatrix Potter. She paints a lot of rabbits. So yeah, I thought a bear would have been a nice idea. And this bear, as it happens during the prompt, finds a backpack and then a pair of boots, a binocular, and then is always mooching around the place with its gear. Like you can see the bear here. This was the prompt for this painting, for example, was a remote. So the bear is sitting on a remote cliff or rock looking at a very remote moon with his backpack on the side. I find it quite difficult, to be honest, to keep up with the challenge. It requires a lot of commitment, one painting a day for the month. We are now the 14th, 13th of October, so you know it's a lot of paintings, a lot of energy that goes up, and as well my being mindful of my materials, I always try to reuse old paper that I have lying around there. This, for example, was a painting you can tell of in Irish pubs that I didn't like. So the paper is very valuable. Watercolor paper is really expensive. So I'm trying to reuse that. God knows what will come up with this bear. I'm always hoping that someone in the audience is a I don't know, a publisher and is fascinated about my art and impressed about my art and will contact me and offer me a full-time job as an illustrator. But that won't happen, of course. I'm just joking myself. But anyway, this is Inktober and is something that is going on a daily basis. Apart from the work itself, it's really helpful for me to develop the character. When I say develop, I mean keeping the same features but making the character do stuff around its environment. So not just a fixed portrait of a bear, but just make him do stuff. And that is all development. So looking at poses, features, backgrounds, and stuff like that. Use of color and so on. That's very, very interesting. And as well is a bit mindful, of course. The last thing I would like to mention to you is an update on my reading. So, if you've been following my last few podcasts, well, I will say few podcasts, being a few years now, I've been seriously taking up reading a lot. For a couple of reasons. That started when I was like, I am not reading at all or as much as I should be. When I was in high school or gymnasium, I have no idea how you say that in English, but I used to read a lot. Then university, law school started, and I dropped completely my reading. I couldn't afford reading something that wasn't a law book or a book for university. It was really, really difficult and really bad. If you think about going to law school, don't. Anyway, just joking. But yeah, I felt really guilty about reading something that wasn't a law book. It was a bit of a waste of time. And unfortunately, I brought that piece with me for years after I finished university. Someone would say the university gave me a trauma, which is probably true. Anyway, I decided to read the 100 book list that you find on the internet of books that you should read in your lifetime. And I started with that, but if you are into reading a little bit, you know exactly how it works, and I very soon sidetracked from that list into everything else. A good example is reading a book from Tolkien, The Hobbit. And I was so captured about The Hobbit, which is featured in the list of the 100 books to read in your lifetime, that I basically had to read all the other Tolkiens, and you can see them all there. Everything else that this poor man written, I read it after that list. So you can see how I sidetracked. Another example was Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway. I read For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is in the list. So hooked by the way that Hemingway writes that I had to read them all. So I soon detached myself from that list and I started to random read books that are recommended to me or that I find interesting. Anyway, an update for this couple of weeks is these three books. One that I enjoyed massively is The Evening and the Morning by Ken Follett. It's basically a continuation or a flashback of the story about Kingsbridge and the Pillar of Earth. If you've heard about that book, it's super famous. And this goes back way before Kingsbridge was built or just started to be built, and it's the same plot in all the Kingsbridge saga. Basically, a guy falling in love with a girl, and then the guy being super crafty and building something, and then all the terrible situation that happened. Now, I don't know if it's because it takes place in somewhere in the Middle Ages, and it's very fascinating. If it's Ken Follett's way to read, but a massive book of 900 pages lasted me a week, which was brilliant. Now, this is the second last book of this saga, and I already have the next one, that is The Armor of Light. I don't know if you can see, it's just there. And part of me is keeping that there because I really enjoy this saga so much that I don't want to waste these books. Do you know what I mean? Now, finish this, I needed something Ken Follett, and I couldn't bring myself to read the last book of the saga, so I bought this, which is The Key to Rebecca. Takes place in Second World War Egypt, if I'm right. It's a nice story, don't get me wrong, but wasn't my cup of tea. I don't know if it is because of the environment of the Second World War or Egypt. I didn't find it as capturing as the Kingsbridge saga. Still nice, but not great. And the thing that drove me to this book is that I really liked how Ken Follett writes. So I was like, oh well, if I can find something else, Ken Follett, which is not the Kingsbridge saga, and I would enjoy this anyway, fine. So I have a lot of books to read, but this wasn't a great example, in my opinion. Although this is a very famous book from him. I might try another Ken Follett book. There is another saga that I'm kind of tempted to start, but we'll see. Now, because I was finishing this Code to Rebecca's book at the airport, I kind of panicked because I didn't have any other books to read on the plane or while I was in Italy. That is bad time management from my side. So at the airport, I bought this book here. You can't see the cover. I'll get to that in a second. This is Young Mongo by Douglas Stewart. This is the most excruciating story I've read in a long time. It's about, no spoilers here, I'll just give you some idea what the story is about. It's about a young guy called Mungo that lives in Glasgow, in the outskirts of Glasgow, really poor, troubled family. And it's basically the story about himself through finding his own self. You need to read this to understand it, because I can't say something without spoiling the book, and it's so brilliant that I would really recommend this book. It's difficult to read because it's written with a Glasgowian flair, especially the dialogues. It takes a while to get into the meaning of the word, and I found myself Googling a lot of expressions just because it's very difficult, but I think it gives to the authenticity of the book. So yeah, I read it basically in a breath of time, and when it was finished, it took me like a few days before shaking myself up and getting to read something else because it's that heavy. But it finishes beautifully, and it's really, really heartwarming. I wish they make a movie out of this soon because it's brilliant. It's cruel. It's everything that you want from a very good story, and it's all very true to life, if you know what I mean. This could have happened. I don't know if it's a true story or not. But now, why the cover is not showing? Uh, Very interesting fact. I was reading this at home and I left this on the kitchen table. And my mom saw this book. I'm 30 something years of age. I shouldn't have this block or this guilt, but the cover shows two guys kissing quite intensively. And my mom, she's a very traditional woman, not very old, but very traditional, strict Catholic woman. And she was like, we shouldn't have these type of things around the house. So I was like, all right, I could have left it there, no problem at all. But yeah, I didn't really feel comfortable in seeing two guys deep kissing on the cover of the book hanging around the place. So I decided to cover it, which is not bad because I really love this music paper, and I think would be nice to have different books covered rather than just one. Anyway, just to give you a light anecdote of my life as a reader in my family. Last one. I started this a couple of days ago, and it's I Beati Paoli by Luigi Natoli. I don't know if you can find this translated in English. I suppose so. It's a really famous book. It's a massive beast of 1,000-something pages that collects a story. It's a novel, an historical story that was first published in the beginning of the 20th century, in the beginning of 1900, in a newspaper in Sicily. It's a story about these guys here. These are I Beati Paoli, which is sort of a secret sect of people that used to fight injustice in Sicily back in the 1600s. And it's a true historical situation that really happened. So this group of people that nobody knew who they were or nobody could catch, they used to fight the nobility, for example, against their I don't know. I don't even know how you say that. When the usurper of the justice, when they were like not treating right their people or their servants and so on and so forth. It's so long to read, like it's dragging massively. I thought the story would have been more like flowy and so on and so forth, but A, it's old Italian, oldish Italian, and B, it's very descriptive. It's like you read a book out of, I don't know, the Bronte sisters. They are so descriptive, so long, so wordy. So, yeah. This is happening. I'm at page 202. It's very long, but it's interesting. It's an historical event that happened there. So I would probably have a look if I find this translated in English. That would work. That's it. A lot of talking, a lot of stuff to share with you all, and I really hope you enjoyed. Now, I don't really have much more to read currently, so if you have any books that you would recommend me, put it in the note below. I always like to hear about what you would recommend. I'm very into historical novels, so if you have something like that, that would be great. If you have some Ken Follett's book that you think is worth, let me know. And yeah, that's it. I will see you very, very soon. Bye bye.